Alright, so part 4. This is the map for Starix, and I created the map on the game Age of Empires 2. Age of Empires 2 has a nice scenario editor with a lot of different options, so I was able to create the entire map of Starix here. And just keep in mind that it's not all to scale. I'd say like one tree tile is maybe half a mile or so, maybe like a quarter mile. That might be a little too small, but the continent is split up into 4 parts, and in the corner here there's a little mini map. I might be able to zoom in on that or take a screenshot of it. And yeah, but in all, the whole map is not really that big. The whole world of Starix, the continents are not massive, and it wouldn't be impossible for one person to travel all of it in their lifetime using horses or something like that. But it is pretty treacherous to navigate, obviously. So you can see it's split up into 4 regions. Here in the middle is the temple. This actually is a pretty good depiction of it, and I had to work with the assets that they provide in Age of Empires, and so this is where they craft the elements, where you meet Vorquil and everything. And the center area is all called Starix, and the fringes and the land bridges are called the Farhearth. And the Farhearth is these far areas, kind of right on the edge between one continent and another. Here's the temple, and then over here, this is Lorehaven. This is where the ancient bloodline city was. Obviously, this is not to scale either. This kind of represents the entire city, but yeah, it has these really tall towers and everything, and I thought this building kind of represented the architecture best. So that's where one of the bloodline kings rules from, and that's also where the ancient bloodline throne was, but now it's called Lorehaven. And on the very opposite side of Starix, there's another little region over here. And these are the mud flats. And the mud flats, right where this little pillar is here, this represents where you can go underground and actually access Deamazu, which is the great maze and underground fortress. It's like a labyrinth, and then there's kind of a stronghold under there of the other bloodline king, Deamandus. And there's these little cliffs and things here, and it's really hard to navigate because all this land is really muddy and marshy, and there's it's just really hard to get through without getting stuck. So this is Starix, and there's kind of like a little swamp over here. This is Montegoria. Montegoria is the biggest swamp over here in Starix. I threw a couple little skeletons around just to represent all the battles that happened during the Age of Dark Battles. And there's some right here. So all of this area was a battlefield. There used to be nations in all of the different areas in the 3 other continents, but during the time of the story of Starix, they're pretty much all extinct. There's a couple of small tribes here and there that are left. And then we'll actually go now to the first. This is the little land bridge that connects Curium, which is the land of Koth, the blue star. And it's a frozen tundra, icy winds always going. Down here it's a little more mild. some bays and things like that, and even has a couple of green trees, but mostly it's just full. I didn't add any animals, might do that later, but there's a lot of wolves here and things like that. And then right where this obelisk is where you would find the Temple of Koth, and that's where you'd fight like the Phantomites and everything. This is the Frozen Plateau, and there's also this next one, Dionum. Dionum is the land of the desert. There's these little islands off to the side here, a couple of little islands, and this is a rocky pass through these cliffs and stuff. And obviously this is just a general representation. You know, one tree is kind of representing like a grove of trees. It's not really just one single tree. And this would represent like a massive forest, not just a little grove. So just keep that in mind. And there's kind of like a little mesa over here. This is a really dry desert, no water, very difficult to navigate, so you kind of have to come through this way. And there's not really much of an oasis over here except for this area. But I think I would probably add a couple more little oasis here and there. Let's do that right now, actually. Take some shallow water. Get it in really tiny. And I'm just going to dot a couple little oasis here and there, just to make it a little more livable seeming. A couple of places where you can water your horses and then continue on your journey. And I'm just going to add a couple of palm trees around, make it look pretty. Cool. Yeah, I like that better. So, yeah. There's the oasis. I know I had mentioned that there were supposed to be oasis and watering holes without it, but there is also areas of Dionum that's super dangerous. No water anywhere, extremely hot. And we go all the way to this end. You'll see this. This is where the Temple of Nish is, or whatever. Then once you get here, you'd be confronted by like the creatures of Nish. Exile Searcher being the most powerful. And then let's go this way, around the edge, and there's one last continent. Across this narrow land bridge here, you get to these jungles, little marsh there. I really like these trees, they look really nice. And a marshy land, lots of jungles, bamboo. But as you go up this way, there's rivers. Very complicated landmass here, easy to get confused. Nice waterfall here. And once you get all the way around, you come to this high mountainous area. And this represents the Temple of Azia, which would be right here. Temple of the Green Star. So those are the 3 different regions around Starix that are ruled by the 3 different arch stars. And obviously Zoin was the 4th arch star that we talked about in part 2. And that one kind of is the ruler of this area according to the lore and legends. So there is one last little Easter egg here, one last little area. And this is called the Tower of the Slain. This tower, the Tower of the Slain, is an ancient Arcanist burial site. It's kind of like a mausoleum, and it would be not exactly looking like this, but it would be really, really tall and all made of stone. This is just a representation, and it's kind of abandoned, but it's where the Arcanists would have gone to be buried. I shouldn't say buried because it's above ground, but it's a tower mausoleum called the Tower of the Slain. And yeah, so that's kind of a interesting and mysterious location. And all of Starix and these continents are just surrounded by a really deep ocean that's just filled with a lot of dangerous sea creatures. Nobody ever ventures out because there's no chance of there being any other land masses out there. It just pretty much goes on forever as far as anybody knows. So that's the map of Starix. So let's put a little bit of the lore here now, and I'll read it off. So in the timeline of the lore, the Age of Primals kind of was before humans, but when humans came along, the first bloodline king was born, and that started the royal bloodline, and they also built the Arcanist Temple. But the ancient unseen entities of Nochladel and Nexhile battle. Nexhile tears out Nochladel's left eye and puts it into his forehead, causing extreme imbalance and unpredictability in the world. That's the lore of how the world got so imbalanced and destructive. Then twins were born in the royal bloodline, which had never happened before. So in the world of Starix, twins are completely unheard of. People only have one child at a time. But in the royal bloodline, these twins were born, which was totally shocking for the royal family. And factions emerged between the two bloodlines, Lorgrave and Diamandus. Lorgrave technically had the right to the throne, and his mother passed him down the Ijar knife, which is the ritual knife of the bloodline, and it's also one of the items that you start with. And Lorgrave and Diamandus being born as twins caused a lot of unrest in the bloodline kingdom. So I'm just gonna return to the pixel art version of the art and everything, but now that you got a good understanding of what the map looks like, you can visualize the different regions a little better, and hopefully it'll help you understand the story behind it, and you can kind of picture how far apart things are and what the different continents are like, the different regions. Alright, so the Age of Dark Battles began because of the schism between the two bloodline twins. All the plinths and effigies in the temple were destroyed during the Dark Battles because of the disagreements among the different Arcanist factions. The Arcanists abandoned their temple to pick sides and fight amongst themselves, except for Vorquil, the Temple Watch. Lorgrave and Diamandus mysteriously disappear from their thrones one night. Their followers remain loyal and continue to fight, however. So nobody really knows where Lorgrave and Diamandus went. Some say that they're still in their strongholds, they're just kind of hidden away and staying safe. And they have a long-lasting life because of their powers, so they live longer than anybody else, pretty much. and people say they're hundreds of years old. So a new faction then emerges, which is Greythorn. And I didn't really put Greythorn on the map, but Greythorn is in the Farhearth area. It's called Greythorn Manor, and it's a small. It's kind of like a couple little towns, and then a stronghold with a castle. Greythorn Manor is ruled by Hars. It's on the edge of Starix near the Ryum Farhearth, and that's near the land bridge that connects Starix to Ryum, the land of the Green Star, which is the jungle and everything. Vorquil finds a half-dead Arcanist on the field of battle near the temple. The Arcanist is somehow holding the famed Ijar knife, passed down for generations through the bloodline. The Arcanist doesn't remember anything about his past, having barely survived getting the stonium visor crushed into his skull while in battle. Vorquil brings him to the temple and heals him. He becomes Vorquil's apprentice and is the main character in this part of the game. The Arcanist apprentice begins his journey. He's instructed by Vorquil to build the plinths and effigies and find the missing books that were once in the temple archive. So yeah, there's the little items there, like the Ijar knife of the bloodline. There's the visor that the Arcanist was wearing when Vorquil found him. The Arcanist apprentice proves to be an unstoppable force with the power of the effigies that he crafts. He crafts them from the elements that he siphons from echoes, which are the malevolent beings associated with different elements that appeared after the battle between Nexile and Nochlotl. So not only were the Arcanists fighting amongst themselves, but during that time there started to be all these strange elemental creatures that appeared, and that caused even more chaos and destruction. Some people destroyed them, some people were fighting them, some people began to serve them. They were too afraid to try to resist. So, yeah, and there's just a little more lore here, but I think I'm going to save the rest for later because there's just some spoilers. But I can read this part. The Arcanists built the temple during the Age of the Bloodline. They could control and subdue the elements. They used the temple to make plinths and hold effigies to represent every element and combinable elements. The effigies granted them powers that kept any opposing forces at bay, mostly the echoes. The Arcanists were once a powerful group of intelligent guardians who sought to keep balance and peace in Starix and stop the echoes from becoming too powerful. Elements that were not used to craft were offered to the temple in the Crucible. The Crucible was a large bowl-like altar where the light of the three archstars was focused using giant lenses. The elements would burn up under the starlight focuses on the Crucible and rise up back to the archstars in the sky. And so they would sometimes just offer the elements, and you could also use the Crucible to melt them down depending on the heat. If you had all three of the lenses focused onto the Crucible, then it would be hot enough to just completely melt it, and it would rise up like smoke, and that was offering the elements back up to the archstars. And the cycle continued like this, from the archstars to the echoes to the elements. When the bloodline split between Lorgrim and Deimundus, the temple was left looted and abandoned, with only Vorquil remaining. He was unable to continue the cycle of the offering alone. Now that no one offers the ancient elements to the stars are beginning to fade, and the echoes are growing stronger. So there's always been these echo creatures, but during the dark battles, because of the Arcanists not offering elements anymore and not subduing them, they just became more and more powerful. And the cycle has kind of broken. The Bloodline was united against the Echoes, and they supported the Arcanists before the Age of Dark Battles. But now the Arcanists fight amongst themselves and have nearly all been slain. Alright, that's the basic lore. Here's a little UI screen. I showed this before, but this is going to be exploration. Not going to explain exploration right now. And here's like home, or this would be like the Tower of the Slain, which is kind of like your home button. Forge stuff, see your skills, and here's the main symbol of the game. This symbol represents the 3 archstars and their light getting focused down. And it's like the main symbol of the Arcanists. Alright, so that's the end. Part 4, and I'll see you in the next one.